Welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking you into a forgotten place where every footstep echoes through time and the air around you vibrates with an unseen menace. What if a simple exploration spiraled into a living nightmare? In this video, we're diving deep into one of the most terrifying stories you'll ever hear. So get ready for a journey where every shadow could conceal danger, and the courage of our protagonists will be pushed to its limits. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button so we can keep uncovering these haunting mysteries together. Now, let's take you to Oak Hill, where everything changed. God, this was a mistake. A terrible, irreversible mistake. I'm typing this on my phone, hands trembling with each keystroke, not knowing if anyone will ever read these words. But if someone does, I want them to know what happened to us, what really happened in Oak Hill. My name is Frankie Said, and what started as an innocent exploration has become something unimaginable. It was supposed to be a fun, thrilling adventure, nothing more. But now 3 of us are dead, and I'm not sure if the rest of us will make it out alive. Maybe it's already too late. Maybe we were doomed the moment we stepped inside. It all began early this morning when Jade messaged us in our group chat. She had found a way into the old Oak Hill apartment building, a place we'd all been curious about for years. The building had been sealed so tight, boarded up with rusted metal grates that seemed designed to keep something in rather than out. Rumors swirled around Oak Hill. Some said it was haunted. Others whispered of a crime covered up long ago. But Jade, fearless as ever, had found a way in. Or maybe something found her, and now I wonder, was this all part of some sinister plan? We arrived at Oak Hill around the same time, the sun shining brightly as if mocking the darkness that lay ahead. The neighborhood, usually bustling with life, seemed eerily quiet as we stood before the imposing structure. The name Oak Hill was carved into the stone arch over the boarded doors, a faint reminder of a time when this place might have been grand. But now, it was a tomb, a relic of the past that held secrets never meant to be uncovered. "Hey guys, I found a way in," JT called out, his voice tinged with excitement. We hurried over to find him crouched in front of a rusted metal grate, a section of it peeled back as if someone or something had pried it open. "Did Jade do this?" Sequoia asked, her voice laced with concern. "It must have been her," Matt replied, his tone serious. "But it's really stupid of her to go in alone." Matt was always the cautious one, the unofficial leader of our group whenever Jade wasn't around. Jade was the fearless one, always diving headfirst into danger without a second thought. But this felt different. The air around us was thick with unease, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something far more dangerous than we could have imagined. JT was the first to drop into the building through the broken grate, his headlamp cutting through the darkness like a knife. One by one, we followed, each of us swallowed by the blackness as we entered the apartment. The room we landed in was small, with white walls and a cheap popcorn ceiling. It was completely bare, except for a large, reddish-brown stain on the carpet, a stain that looked disturbingly like dried blood. "Focus, we need to find Jade," Matt barked, snapping us out of our daze. He was right. Jade was somewhere in this building, and we had to find her. But as JT opened the door to the hallway and stuck his head out, the darkness beyond was so thick it felt like it was pressing in on us, suffocating us. Why hadn't she answered our calls? What had drawn her here so early in the morning? A nagging voice in my head asked if Jade had even sent that message herself. But I pushed the thought away, too afraid to consider the possibility that something else was at play. We split up to search the building, Matt and JT taking the basement and first floor, while Sequoia and I headed to the second and third floors. "Call as soon as you find anything, no pranks." "Okay," Matt instructed, his voice firm. "Roger that," I replied, trying to keep the fear from creeping into my voice. We were just exploring an old building, right? There was nothing to be afraid of. So I told myself. As we made our way through the second floor, it became clear that Oak Hill was more than just an abandoned building. Each apartment had an identical layout, yet something felt off. The walls were white, but the shadows seemed to dance across them, alive and malevolent. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath our feet. "Hey, you want some leftovers? I found some food in the refrigerator," Sequoia joked, trying to lighten the mood as she explored a kitchen that had seen better days. But her voice was strained, and we both knew this was no ordinary exploration. My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. It was a picture from Jade, but it was too dark to make out anything clearly. "Which floor are you on?" I texted back, my heart pounding in my chest. But there was no reply. Just silence. What was she doing? Was she trying to scare us, or was something else happening? As we continued our search, I noticed something glinting in the beam of my flashlight. At the end of the hallway was a door marked trash room, and wedged into it was a black satchel decorated with enamel pins, cats, rainbows, and one that read "Bad Bee." It was Jade's shoulder bag. "Jade," I called out, my voice echoing in the empty hallway. But there was no answer. Only the oppressive silence that seemed to close in around me, suffocating me. I yelled for Sequoia, but she was too far away, her voice lost somewhere in the building. Taking a deep breath, I shoved the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. Something was blocking it from the other side, but I forced my way through, stumbling into the room. My flashlight skittered across the floor, its beam dancing wildly before coming to rest on something that made my blood run cold. Legs. I had tripped over legs. The light from my flashlight shone directly at me, blinding me momentarily, but what I saw when I blinked the spots away was worse than anything I could have imagined. Lying before me, her neck twisted at an unnatural angle, her eyes vacant and staring into nothingness, was Jade. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt my heart slam against my ribs, my mind screaming at me to run. But I was frozen, paralyzed by the horror of what lay before me. Jade, our fearless leader, was dead. And we were next. "Don't go to the third floor," I texted frantically, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. But it was too late. Whatever had killed Jade was still here, and it wasn't going to stop. It was hunting us, one by one, and I knew there was no escape. We had walked right into its trap. I screamed for Sequoia, my voice hoarse and desperate as I ran back through the hallway. But there was no trace of her, no sign that she had ever been there. I ran to the stairwell, my mind racing as I dialed Matt's number, praying he would pick up. "Matt, don't go to the third floor. Jade's dead. We have to get out of here now," I shouted into the phone, panic rising in my chest. "What?" "Calm down, Frankie. What are you talking about?" Matt's voice was tense, but I could hear the fear creeping into his tone. "Jade's dead, Matt. Her neck ... It's broken. Something killed her, and it's coming for us next. You have to leave." Now I was hysterical, the words tumbling out of me in a frantic rush. "Frankie, just chill. We're coming back up," Matt started, but then the line went dead. No more words, no more sounds, just silence. Matt, I whimpered, trying to call him back, but there was no connection. No answer from JT or Sequoia either. Only the dead, cold silence of Oak Hill and the suffocating darkness that surrounded me. My phone buzzed again, and I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Matt, calling back. Relief washed over me as I answered, but the voice on the other end sent a chill down my spine. "Hello," Matt's voice echoed in my ear, but something was wrong. His tone was off, the inflection almost ... mimicked. "Matt, where are you guys?" "Are you okay?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Where are you guys? Are you okay?" Matt's voice repeated, the echo of my own words sending a jolt of fear through me. "Matt, what happened to you? What happened to JT?" I whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady. "What happened to you? What happened to JT?" The voice on the other end mimicked again, each word a twisted reflection of my own. And then, in the hallway, I heard the soft rustle of movement, the faint, wet sound of something dragging across the floor. My blood ran cold as I realized I was no longer alone. "Hello," the voice whispered again, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was too focused on the sound outside, the sound of whatever was coming for me. I hung up, my hands shaking as I tried to type a message to JT. "JT, what happened? Are you okay? Matt just called me, but I don't think it's Matt. Where the heck are you? Sequoia's dead? JT, are you alive?" No response. Just silence. I waited, trapped in that tiny closet, my breath coming in shallow gasps as I listened to the sounds outside. It was getting closer, whatever it was, and I knew that if it found me, I wouldn't stand a chance. My phone buzzed again, and I nearly screamed, but I quickly silenced it, not daring to make a sound. It was Matt calling again, but this time I didn't answer. I couldn't. The darkness was suffocating. I could feel it pressing in on me, heavy and cold, like a thick blanket wrapped around my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of that closet. But where would I go? Whatever was out there was hunting us, one by one, and the walls of Oak Hill were closing in, making escape impossible. For a few minutes, or was it hours? I stayed frozen, my heart pounding so loudly that I was sure it would give me away. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the occasional drip of water somewhere in the distance. What was I waiting for? What was keeping me from just making a break for it? Then, suddenly, Sequoia's phone rang again, that same cutesy, bubbly anime ringtone echoing through the hallway. The sound was jarringly out of place, a cruel reminder of what had happened. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream, every muscle in my body tensing as I waited for whatever was out there to react. The phone rang and rang, each chime like a nail being hammered into my skull, until finally it stopped. Silence returned, and I was left alone with my thoughts, my mind racing as I tried to piece together what had happened. Was this all real, or had I lost my mind? Was I trapped in some horrific nightmare from which there was no waking up? No, this was real. Too real. I had to get out. I couldn't just stay here and wait to die. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed open the closet door, every nerve on edge as I peeked into the hallway. It was empty, but the oppressive darkness seemed to shift and swirl as if it was alive, watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I tiptoed down the corridor, my flashlight switched off to avoid drawing attention. Each step felt like a death sentence, the creak of the floorboards beneath my feet echoing in the stillness. Where was everyone? What had happened to Matt and JT? And where the hell was that thing that had killed Jade and Sequoia? I had to get to the basement, to the egress window where we had entered. That was my only chance. But as I reached the end of the corridor, a sudden noise nearly made me jump out of my skin. The sound of Sequoia's ringtone again, coming from the apartment with the stacked chairs, the same apartment where I had seen her lifeless body. Was it a trap? Was whatever had done this to her waiting for me inside? I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming at me to run the other way, but I couldn't. If there was any chance at all that she was still alive, I had to try. I owed her that much. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the apartment, the door creaking ominously as it swung shut behind me. The room was dim, lit only by the faint glow of the phone's screen. I inched forward, my flashlight still off, relying on my other senses to guide me. The stack of chairs loomed in the center of the room, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls, and there, lying beneath them, was Sequoia, or what was left of her. Her legs dangled from the hole in the ceiling, the rest of her body hidden in the darkness above. Blood dripped down the wood, pooling on the floor in a sickeningly crimson puddle. My stomach churned at the sight, bile rising in my throat as I fought the urge to be sick. The phone buzzed again, vibrating against the wood as it slid out of her pocket and clattered to the floor. I stared at it, my mind racing with questions. Who was calling her? And why? My hand shook as I reached down to pick it up, my fingers brushing against the blood-stained screen. But before I could answer, the call ended, the screen going dark once more. I hesitated, wondering if I should try calling Matt again. Maybe he was still out there, still alive. But the thought of hearing that twisted mimicry of his voice again made my blood run cold. I backed away, the walls seeming to close in around me, suffocating me. I had to get out, now. But as I turned to leave, the floorboards creaked loudly under my weight, and I froze, every muscle tensing as I listened for any sign that I had been heard. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint, steady dripping of blood from Sequoia's body. But then, from somewhere deep within the building, I heard it a low, rhythmic thumping, like the beat of a drum. It was faint at first, barely audible, but it grew louder with each passing second, echoing through the halls like a death march. What was that? Was it the thing that had killed Jade and Sequoia? Was it coming for me now? I didn't wait to find out. I turned and bolted, running as fast as I could through the darkened corridors, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I fought to stay ahead of the sound. The walls seemed to twist and shift around me, the layout of the building warping and changing, as if it was alive, trying to trap me within its maze-like confines. Finally, I reached the stairwell, the cold metal railing slick with condensation as I gripped it tightly and began to descend. The sound of the thumping was getting closer, louder, reverberating through the walls like a heartbeat. But whose heart was it? And why was it so loud? I stumbled down the stairs, my feet slipping on the wet steps as I made my way to the basement. The door loomed ahead, a sliver of light seeping through the crack beneath it. My only way out. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest, and stepped into the pitch-black corridor beyond. The egress window was just ahead, its broken frame letting in a faint trickle of daylight. Freedom. I could see it, smell it, feel it on the edge of my fingertips. I was so close, but as I took a step forward, a soft rustling sound behind me made my blood run cold. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in my chest, and there, standing in the darkness, was Matt. He was just standing there, his back to me, swaying slightly, as if he was drunk or disoriented. The light from the window barely reached him, casting his shadow in long, distorted shapes on the floor. For a moment, I felt a surge of relief Matt was alive. But then he turned his head, and I saw his face. Or what was left of it. His eyes were sunken, hollow pits, his skin pale and stretched tight over his skull. Blood oozed from his mouth, dripping onto his shirt in thick, dark streaks, but it was his voice that sent a jolt of fear through me, freezing me in place. "Frankie," he said, his voice a garbled mess of sound, like he was struggling to remember how to speak. "Frankie, is that you?" I couldn't answer, my throat closing up in terror as I stared at the grotesque figure that had once been my friend. What had happened to him? What had done this to him? "Frankie," he said again, his voice growing more desperate, more insistent. "Where are you?" But it wasn't Matt. I knew that now. Whatever was standing in front of me was no longer my friend. It was something else, something that had taken his place, and it was coming for me next. I backed away, my breath hitching in my throat as I tried to stay out of the creature's reach. But it sensed my fear, and it began to move, shuffling toward me with slow, deliberate steps, its mouth twisting into a grotesque smile. "Frankie," it rasped, its voice echoing in the darkness. "Don't you want to see your friends again?" No, I didn't. I didn't want to see what had become of them, didn't want to know what horrors had befallen them in the depths of this cursed building. I turned and ran, the sound of the creature's footsteps echoing behind me as I fled down the corridor. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. But the building seemed to stretch on forever, the walls narrowing around me, the darkness closing in. I was trapped, lost in a maze of nightmares with no way out. Finally, I stumbled into a room at the end of the hall, slamming the door shut behind me. The room was small, claustrophobic, with no windows and no light. But it was a sanctuary, however temporary, from the horrors that lurked outside. I collapsed onto the floor, my back pressed against the door as I tried to catch my breath. My heart was racing, my mind a jumbled mess of fear and confusion. How had this happened? How had we gone from exploring an abandoned building to being hunted by ... what? What was this thing that had taken Matt, that had killed Jade and Sequoia? And why had it chosen us? My phone buzzed in my pocket, the sudden sound making me jump. With trembling hands, I pulled it out, dreading what I might see on the screen. It was a message, but not from any of my friends. The number was unfamiliar, the text short and simple. Come to the basement. The basement. The very place I had just escaped from. But why? What was waiting for me down there? And what had sent that message? I didn't want to go back. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stay where I was, to find another way out. But deep down, I knew there was no other choice. If I wanted to survive, if I wanted any chance of getting out of here alive, I had to face whatever was waiting for me in the basement. With a deep breath, I forced myself to stand, my legs shaking as I made my way back to the door. I had to be strong. I had to be brave. For Jade, for Sequoia, for Matt, for myself. The corridor was dark and silent as I stepped out, my heart pounding in my chest as I retraced my steps to the stairwell. The thumping sound had stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I was alone, or at least I hoped I was. The basement door loomed ahead, its wooden surface scarred and worn from years of neglect. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the handle as I braced myself for what was to come. This was it, the final descent. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped into the darkness. The basement was colder than I remembered, the air thick with the stench of mildew and something metallic and sharp that made my stomach churn. My flashlight flickered as I descended the stairs, its weak beam struggling to pierce the oppressive darkness. The walls were damp, the moisture clinging to the rough concrete like sweat on a fevered brow. With every step I took, the darkness seemed to grow thicker, more suffocating, as if the building itself was alive, breathing, and waiting for me to reach the bottom. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, but I pushed it aside. I couldn't afford to lose focus now. When I finally reached the basement floor, the silence was deafening, broken only by the faint dripping of water somewhere in the distance. The egress window was nowhere to be seen, swallowed up by the dark. I was completely alone, or so I thought. The text had told me to come to the basement, but where exactly? The basement was a labyrinth of rooms and corridors, each one more foreboding than the last. Where could it be leading me, and why? As I stood there, trying to decide which way to go, a faint glow caught my attention. It was coming from the far end of the hallway, just barely visible in the gloom. My heart skipped a beat as I realized it was the same sickly yellow light I had seen before, the light that had flickered in the room where I had found JT. Was this the same room? Was it calling me back? With no other options, I forced my feet to move, every step echoing through the empty halls like a death knell. The light grew brighter as I approached, casting long, twisted shadows on the walls. The closer I got, the more I could feel a presence, something unseen but palpable, pressing down on me, watching me with malevolent intent. Finally, I reached the door. It was slightly ajar, just like before, the light spilling out into the corridor. My heart raced as I pushed it open, the hinges creaking loudly in the silence. The room was exactly as I remembered it, small and cramped, with rusted lockers lining the walls and tools scattered haphazardly across the floor. But this time, the body in the corner was gone. JT, I called out, my voice trembling. But there was no response, only the oppressive silence that seemed to close in around me, suffocating me. I stepped further into the room, my flashlight sweeping across the walls, but there was nothing there. No sign of JT, no sign of the creature that had taken him. Just the empty, lifeless space that felt like a tomb. And then the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, but there was no one there. No one except for the darkness that now pressed in on me from all sides. I ran to the door, my hands fumbling with the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. Panic surged through me as I pounded on the door, desperate to escape, but it was no use. The walls seemed to close in around me, the air growing thick and suffocating. I could feel it whatever it was drawing closer, its presence a cold, creeping dread that seeped into my bones. And then, in the stillness, I heard it. A heartbeat. It was faint at first, barely audible, but it grew louder with each passing second, a steady, rhythmic thump that reverberated through the walls, through the floor, through my very being. It was the same sound I had heard before, but this time, it was right here with me, pulsing with a life of its own. My flashlight flickered and then died, plunging the room into darkness. The heartbeat grew louder, faster, the sound filling my head, drowning out all other thoughts. I clapped my hands over my ears, trying to block it out, but it was no use. It was inside me now, a part of me, and it wouldn't let go. I fell to my knees, my breath coming in ragged gasps as the sound consumed me. My vision blurred, the room spinning around me as the walls seemed to close in, the darkness pressing down on me like a physical weight. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the heartbeat stopped. The silence that followed was absolute, more terrifying than the noise had been. I was alone in the dark, my heart racing, my body trembling with fear. What was happening? What was this place? And why had it chosen us? But before I could dwell on those questions, the faint glow returned, this time from a different corner of the room. I turned toward it, my breath catching in my throat as I realized it was coming from beneath a rusted metal grate in the floor. What was down there? Was this what had been calling me all along? I didn't want to know. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to find another way out, but I couldn't move. It was as if something was pulling me toward the light, something unseen but irresistible. I crawled across the floor, my hands trembling as I reached for the grate. It was cold to the touch, the metal slick with condensation. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing with fear and doubt, but then, with a deep breath, I pulled it open. The light beneath was blinding, a brilliant white that seared my eyes and made me recoil. But I forced myself to look, to see what lay below. It was a heart. A massive, pulsating heart, its veins and arteries stretching out like the roots of a tree, embedding themselves into the concrete floor. It was alive, beating with a slow, steady rhythm that matched the sound I had heard before. But this was no ordinary heart. It was grotesque, unnatural, its surface slick with blood, and something else, something dark and oily, that shimmered in the light. I stared at it, my mind unable to comprehend what I was seeing. How was this possible? How could something like this exist, hidden away beneath an abandoned building? And what was it doing here? The answer came to me in a flash of clarity, a sudden, horrifying realization that made my blood run cold. This was the source of everything, the darkness, the fear, the madness that had consumed Oak Hill. This heart, this abomination, was the beating heart of the building itself, a living, breathing entity that fed on the terror and despair of those who entered its walls. And now, it had me. The light grew brighter, the heart beating faster, its rhythm syncing with my own as I felt it reaching out to me, pulling me in. I tried to fight it, tried to pull away, but it was too strong. The room spun around me, the darkness closing in, suffocating me as the light consumed everything. I was falling into the heart, into the darkness, into the nightmare that had claimed so many before me. And as I fell, I heard the voice that had haunted me from the beginning, the voice that had whispered in my ear, telling me to come, telling me to come, telling me to surrender. "Frankie," it whispered, soft and soothing, "you're home now." And then there was nothing. When I awoke, the world was different. The darkness that had consumed me was now a murky gray, the air thick with the stench of mildew and rot. My body ached all over, as if I had been dropped from a great height. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, to make sense of my surroundings. I was in another part of the basement, somewhere deeper, somewhere older. The walls were lined with strange, intricate carvings that seemed to writhe and twist as I stared at them. How long had I been down here? Hours? Days? My sense of time was warped, twisted by the terror and disorientation that had taken hold of me. Every breath felt labored, the air thick and cold, filling my lungs like ice. I forced myself to stand, every movement a struggle against the exhaustion that weighed me down. I had to get out. I had to find a way back to the surface, back to the light. But as I looked around, the reality of my situation settled over me like a suffocating blanket. I was lost, trapped in a labyrinth of corridors and rooms that seemed to shift and change, as if the building itself were alive, intent on keeping me within its grasp. I took a tentative step forward, my hand trailing along the wall for support. The carvings beneath my fingers were rough, their shapes indistinct and unsettling. They depicted scenes of torment and agony, twisted figures writhing in pain, their faces contorted in silent screams. What kind of place was this? What horrors had been committed here? A sound caught my attention, faint and almost imperceptible, a distant, rhythmic pounding, like a heartbeat. I froze, listening, trying to pinpoint its source. It was coming from somewhere ahead, deeper within the bowels of the building. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run in the opposite direction, but I knew there was no escape that way. The building wouldn't let me go. It would twist and turn, leading me in circles, back into its dark heart. I had no choice but to press on, to follow the sound. Maybe it would lead me to answers, to an exit, or to the others if they were even still alive. I moved through the corridors, the pounding growing louder, more insistent with each step. The walls closed in around me, the carvings growing more grotesque, more violent. My breath came in shallow gasps, my pulse racing as the oppressive atmosphere pressed down on me. It felt like the building was squeezing the life out of me, crushing my will to fight. Finally, I reached the source of the sound, a massive door, ancient and covered in the same strange carvings that lined the walls. The pounding was deafening here, reverberating through the door, as if something on the other side was trying to break free. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, fear and desperation warring within me. Was this the end? Was this where it all led? With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room beyond was vast, the air heavy with the scent of incense and something darker, more malevolent. The walls were lined with candles, their flames flickering in the still air, casting long, dancing shadows across the floor. In the center of the room stood an altar, draped in black cloth, and on it lay a figure, a man, bound and gagged, his eyes wide with terror. It was Matt. Matt, I gasped, rushing to his side. His eyes locked onto mine, filled with fear and desperation. I fumbled with the ropes that bound him, my hands shaking as I tried to free him. But before I could finish, a voice echoed through the room, cold and mocking. "You're too late, Frankie. There's no saving him. There's no saving any of you." I spun around, my heart pounding, and there, standing in the shadows, was the creature, the thing that had haunted me, chased me, nearly killed me. But it wasn't alone. Standing beside it, her eyes blank and empty, was Sequoia. "No," I whispered, backing away from the altar, from Matt, from the horror that had taken hold of my friends. "What did you do to them?" The creature smiled, a twisted, grotesque grin that sent a shiver down my spine. "They belong to me now, Frankie, just like you will. just like everyone who enters this place. I shook my head, refusing to believe it. No, I won't. I'll get out of here. I'll find a way. The creature's laughter echoed through the room, chilling me to the bone. You still don't understand, do you? There is no way out. There never was. This place, it's alive, it feeds on your fear, your despair. And once you enter, it won't let you leave. Not ever. The truth hit me like a blow, the weight of it crushing my spirit. There was no escape. We were all doomed, trapped in this nightmare, with no hope of salvation. The creature took a step forward, its claws gleaming in the dim light, ready to claim me, just as it had claimed the others. But then, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to die here, not like this. I wasn't going to let this thing win. With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed one of the candles from the wall and hurled it at the creature. The flame struck its face, and it screamed, a high-pitched, inhuman wail that reverberated through the room. The creature recoiled, its skin blistering and burning, the flames spreading across its body. Taking advantage of the distraction, I turned back to Matt, frantically untying the last of the ropes. "Come on, we have to go," I shouted, pulling him to his feet. But as we turned to flee, Sequoia stepped forward, blocking our path. Her eyes were cold, lifeless, her face twisted into a cruel smile. "You can't leave," she whispered, her voice echoing with the same cold malice as the creature. "It won't let you." I hesitated, torn between the need to save my friend and the overwhelming urge to escape. But there was no time to decide. The creature, now fully engulfed in flames, let out another ear-piercing scream and lunged toward us. Without thinking, I grabbed Matt's hand and ran, pushing past Sequoia, who made no move to stop us. We fled through the door, down the corridor, the creature's screams echoing behind us, growing fainter with each step. But I knew it wasn't over. It would never be over. Not until we were free of this place. We stumbled through the darkness, the labyrinth of corridors seeming to twist and change around us, as if the building itself was trying to keep us trapped. But I refused to stop, refused to give in to the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. Finally, we reached a stairwell, the one that led to the surface, to freedom. My heart leaped with hope as I saw a faint light filtering down from above. But just as we began to climb, the ground shook beneath us, a deep, rumbling growl echoing through the walls. I turned to Matt, his face pale and drenched in sweat. "We're almost there," I gasped, pulling him up the stairs. "Just a little further." But as we reached the top, the stairwell collapsed beneath us, the floor crumbling away, leaving only a gaping hole where the stairs had been. I barely managed to catch hold of the edge, my fingers slipping on the slick, cold surface as I struggled to pull myself up. Matt wasn't so lucky. With a cry, he fell into the darkness below, his scream fading into nothingness. "Matt," I screamed, my voice hoarse, but there was no answer, only the sound of the building groaning, shifting around me. Tears blurred my vision as I pulled myself up, collapsing onto the floor, my body shaking with exhaustion and grief. Matt was gone. Jade was gone. Sequoia was gone. I was the last one left, the last one still fighting against the inevitable. I forced myself to my feet, every muscle aching, every step a struggle. But I had to keep going. I couldn't stop, couldn't let the building win. I had to find a way out, had to survive, if only to make sure that no one else ever suffered the same fate. But as I staggered through the corridor, my vision blurred by tears and exhaustion, I heard a voice soft, soothing, and oh so familiar. "Frankie," it called, and I froze, my heart skipping a beat. It was Sequoia's voice, clear and sweet, calling to me from somewhere just ahead. "Frankie, come to me." I knew it wasn't real. I knew it was another trick, another illusion created by the building to break me, to lure me into its trap. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to see her, had to find her, even if it meant walking into the jaws of the beast. I stumbled forward, the corridor narrowing around me, the walls pressing in, the air growing thick and heavy. But I kept moving, driven by the sound of her voice, by the hope that maybe, just maybe, she was really there, waiting for me. Finally, I reached a door, the last door in the corridor, and I hesitated, my hand hovering over the handle. Was this it? Was this the way out? Or was it the final trap, the final death sentence? Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. The room beyond was small, intimate, bathed in a soft, golden light. And there, standing in the center, was Sequoia, her back to me, her long hair cascading down her back, just as I remembered it. "Sequoia," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. She turned, her eyes locking onto mine, and my heart broke at the sight of her smile, warm, loving, the smile that had always been my safe haven. But as I stepped forward, I realized something was wrong. Her eyes, once so full of life, were empty, hollow, like the eyes of a doll. In her smile, it didn't reach her eyes. It was cold, cruel, and I knew in that moment that this wasn't Sequoia. This was something else, something wearing her face, her voice, her memories. I stopped, my heart pounding, as the illusion shattered around me. The golden light faded, the room growing dark and cold. The figure before me twisted, contorting into a grotesque parody of the woman I had loved, her eyes glowing with malice, her smile widening into a predatory grin. "Frankie," she hissed, her voice a low, mocking whisper. "You really thought you could escape? You really thought you could save them?" I backed away, my mind reeling, as the creature, whatever it was, took a step toward me, its form shifting, changing, becoming something monstrous, something beyond comprehension. "There's no escape," Frankie, it continued, its voice now a chorus of whispers, of screams, of laughter. "You're mine now. You always have been." I turned and ran, fleeing the room, the building, the nightmare that had consumed my life. But no matter how fast I ran, no matter how far I went, I knew the truth. There was no escape. Not from this place. Not from the horror that had claimed my friends, my sanity, my soul. And as I stumbled into the light of the rising sun, the first rays of dawn piercing the darkness, I knew one thing for certain. I would never be free. Not really. The Oak Hill building had claimed me, just as it had claimed so many others before me. And one day it would claim someone else. Because the nightmare never ends. This chilling tale of Oak Hill reminds us just how intriguing and dangerous the unknown can be. Sometimes our curiosity leads us to uncover dark corners that might have been better left undisturbed. What do you think? Do you believe some mysteries should remain buried? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on our next explorations. And of course, leave a like to support us in our quest to uncover the most mysterious and terrifying stories.